Welcome to this video. I'm Kamil Nussbaum. I'm coordinator at IECA, a GNDR member. And in this series of video, we'll talk about project management in human action and disaster risk reduction. This is part of the Local Leadership Academy, or GNDR. Welcome, and I hope you'll enjoy. In this first video, we'll see some key concepts around the project management in human action and disaster risk reduction. Let's start. So first of all, here we have an important question. What is a project? What is a project, again, in our sector, the human response or the disaster risk reduction, but more generally in all the different sectors over there? What is a project? A project is a sequence of tasks. It's not just only a single task to do something, to do some coffee or to do a really specific thing. It is a more complex thing we want to achieve. The second thing is that we should have some defined outcomes. It is not something we are doing because we are happy to do it. We want to do that. We are doing all these things, this sequence of tasks, because we want to achieve something. We have an objective. So this is why is it a project, and it is not just a single activity. Also, we should have a fixed time frame. Again, this is something, we have an objective, we have a defined sequence of tasks, and we should have a time frame to know when we want to achieve what we want to achieve. Obviously, again, in our context, we are working in very complex contexts, and we may have to adapt this time frame, but we'll have to establish a realistic time frame in order to start our project. And this is pretty much the same for the budget. We should have a predefined budget, not just to decide every day, okay, we are going to spend this on that. We should define at the beginning, before starting the project, what resources do we have, and what resources we'll use in the different moments of the project. So this is a quite basic way to define what is a project. Again, it may work for many different organizations and sectors, but definitely these key concepts are really important to understand when we want to start to implement a project in the human response and or in the disaster risk reduction. Let's continue here with another question. What are the key characteristics of a successful project? Again, here we would like to be a bit more specific. Just think about that in our sector, again, in these complex settings, contexts, where we want to work, where we have to work. What are the key characteristics, the key features of a successful project? So let's think about it. You may maybe think about really specific things, maybe to plan our project, to be organized, to optimize our resources, to manage time, very different specific things. But let's try to think about quality criteria, about the key areas, the key things we should look at during all our projects to ensure that we'll actually produce some quality project. So if we're talking about that, we are talking about key quality criteria for our project. If we're talking about quality criteria, we can use these, for instance, coming from the DAC OCD. This is the main group of donors for the international cooperation within the OCD. And we can see relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability. Sometimes we talk about connectivity instead of sustainability when it's not possible, when we don't want to sustain something, but we want to connect with something else. So these are, for instance, quite common quality criteria in our sector. And again, it may be of interest to think when we want to design, we want to start a project, what will be the relevance of it in a specific context. is it coherent with existing policies, our policies, the existing stakeholders, and their mandate, and many other things. We should definitely assess the effectiveness and efficiency. These two criteria are really commonly used in many different sectors, and not just for the human action, disaster resolution, or international cooperation. Effectiveness and efficiency are really commonly used for big businesses, small businesses, public organizations, and because it is to understand that how we'll be effective, are we going to deliver what we want to achieve, and how efficient we will be. So how many resources, time, human resources are we going to need to deliver what we want to deliver. And also impact and sustainability. The impact, it's about long-term, mid-term, long-term effects. We want definitely to have positive long-term effects. And actually in our sector, it's quite important thing to take into account. And also the sustainability, again, it may be connectivity for the human sector, for the emergency response, because we don't want to be sustainable to sustain our effort in the long term, but we want to connect with a more long-term approach. So this is, again, some important quality criteria to take into account, but we can also have a wider view. Here I'm sharing with you the different quality criteria from the core human standard. This is a more high-level standard. This is not only for project management. So this is to assess the quality, the commitment towards quality from the human actors, the different agencies in the sector. And we have here a more detailed way to see the key things to assess, to review, to monitor, to ensure in our work in these very complex contexts. So we can see, obviously, that we have some bits, some connections with the previous 5 quality criteria from the OCDE. The first criteria is human response is appropriate and relevant, about appropriateness and relevance. The second one, human response is effective and timely. And the third one, human response strengthens local capacities, so that is much more specific, and avoid negative effects. Again, it's about the long-term impact and to avoid negative effects. We can see also, if we go to the ninth, to the last criteria, resources are managed and used responsibly for their intended purpose. So this is related, obviously, with the efficiency, to manage well our resources, to deliver what we want to deliver, but using as less as resources possible and time. But I skipped some of the different dimensions there, because we have some really important things. And then this is why I think that the CHS is a good way to assess, to see the complexity of the human work. And it's also apply for the disaster risk reduction work, because we have, with the commitments, with the quality criteria 4, it's about human responses based on communication, participation, and feedback. And the 5 complaints are welcome and addressed. So this is a way to make sure that we are taking into consideration the communities, the people affected by crisis, by working with them, for them, but also with them, with communication, participation, feedback, and also complaints. It is important to have these mechanisms in place to understand what things are not working and what also negative impact we may have. Also, we have some more specific things, and again, quite important in any human response and also disaster risk reduction project. 6, human response is coordinated and complementary, because we have to understand that because we are working in these very complex contexts, we may contribute to a solution, but for sure, and there is no actor that could solve any of the important things in a context. We will contribute with other actors, local actors for sure, internet actors maybe, national actors, regional actors. So we'll have to work all together in a way to really contribute to solve something. Although we can see 7 and 8, you mentioned actors continuously, it's about continuous learning. So it's not to end, and we'll see this with the next slide. We want to learn from what we are doing to improve our work. And 8, it's about staff, to understand that obviously to deliver all these things, to work in these complex contexts, we need to support our staff to do effectively their job. So again, this is just an example, but to understand that because of the complexity of our work, we should definitely understand the variety of things, criteria, dimensions to take into account when when designing a project. And to finalize this first video, I would like to talk about this cycle. So this is the project management cycle, and we can see there are 5 main phases for this project management. The first phase is the programming phase. This is a more general phase. It is the analysis of the situation to understand the existing policies, the strategies, and the different mandates, the different stakeholders in place. This is something organizations are doing as a routine in a specific context. They are producing some reports to understand what are the key problems there and what sort of things, the key risks, also risk and disaster risk, for instance, and what sort of things based on their missions, on their capacities, and they should do in this context. When we actually start a project is with the more specific phase, the identification, where we'll define the basis for the design of an action in a specific context. We'll have to understand the needs. We'll have to understand whether we should start or not this project, and actually we'll see more in depth this phase in the following video. Then we should formulate the project. We should have a specific document to explain the different steps, the different activities we'll have, the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, and the quality management overall of the project. After that, we could start the implementation of the project. So this is actually the stage when we'll implement the different activities. We'll also have to do monitoring of the results of these activities. And at the end of the implementation, we should definitely evaluate the project. So to see at the end, and we'll also talk about that in the next video, we'll evaluate with different quality criteria and different mechanisms what have been done and what have we learned from this project. We may have, if it's a big project, we may have a financial audit at the same time, at the end, to see specifically what we've done with the financial resources. And again, we would go back to the programming phase with all these insights from the evaluation that hopefully would help us to improve our programming.